You're tuned in to the Restaurant RockStars Podcast. Powerful ideas to rock your restaurant. Here's your host, Roger Beaudoin.
Welcome back, everyone, to this episode of the Restaurant RockStars Podcast. You know, COVID-19 has devastated much of our industry. Some are really on the edge of survival, some are thriving, lots are in between. We know that sales are hugely down across the board. We know that even some of the major forces in our industry, the largest chains, are reeling, and they've lost millions and millions in revenues. And their restaurant workers have been laid off. There's been so much of that and afflicted. And now it's about rebuilding. Now it's about getting back to a new normal, they call it. Well, in this week's episode, I'm excited to be talking to Mr. Sean Weissbart. Now, he is a partner in Blank Rome, which is a New York City law firm that specializes in nonprofit 501(c) companies. And this episode is really relevant because Sean is working with some of the leading chefs in the business to create charities to help the afflicted restaurant industry and workers out there that need help and need to get back on their feet. We're talking about Thomas Keller and Danny Meyer and Daniel Boulud. I mean, again, the biggest chef names and restaurant owner operators in the business working with this firm to set up these charities. So we're also going to talk about what you can do if you're so inclined to rally together with other operators or even do this yourself to set up charities and what the benefits are and what the hurdles are and what your concerns should be. It's going to be a robust episode, so stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to the Restaurant RockStars Podcast. You know these are engaging topics that help restaurants rock their profits and build their brands, deliver amazing guest service experiences, but mostly the episodes lately are focused on this pandemic and the crisis that is unprecedented in our industry. So highly relevant today, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Sean Weissbart. Now, he is a partner in a leading law firm in New York City, and Sean specializes in tax-exempt organizations. And what's really relevant about this episode is he is working with some of the leading restaurant groups in this country, some top chefs that everyone's heard of, and they're creating charities that are going to help their industry, our industry, to raise money that's going to aid all the furloughed workers in the hospitality business. So welcome to the show, Sean. I'm so glad you're here.
It's really great to be here and to have an opportunity to talk about this important work that's helping so many Americans in the culinary community.
Well, again, you know, it's so incredible to me how resilient this business is. I mean, we've never seen anything like this, but we are all just digging deep and we're all trying to make our own little impact to just get everybody through this, you know? And this is particularly interesting in that, you know, like I said, some of the leading chefs in the country, if not the world, because they are international chefs and they have restaurants in multiple countries, of course, and they've really banded together. And I want to hear all about what that inspiration was, how that idea came to be, how they approached you. I know you're also involved in a very prestigious organization. You're on the board of directors of a firm, or I should say an organization called Mentor. And there's a culinary competition called the Bocuse d'Or. And that is I guess it takes place in France, so we're going to talk about that. But let's start with the inspiration behind your work with these leading restaurant groups and where it's going and how it came to be and all of that. Take us through it, please.
Sure. So, Roger, just like you said, the culinary community is so strong and so resilient and really looking to help. And it was really thanks to my work with the Bocuse d'Or and being on the director of Mentor that I was connected with a lot of chefs in the culinary community. And a number of them called me on a Sunday. This was before New York City or anywhere else was even quarantined. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how we can help because they knew this was going to be a very big problem for the community. People were not going to restaurants as much. They were talking about quarantines. And on that call, we got together and talked about this idea of employer-sponsored charities and disaster relief charities. Now, thankfully, for a number of years, no one was talking about these things because disaster relief charities were really created after September 11th, Hurricane Katrina, the terrible catastrophes that have happened in the past 2 decades. But we came up with this idea that we could do this for people financially impacted by coronavirus. And instantly, a number of these chefs were ready to sign up and help their people, because their people were so important to contributing to their own success in the restaurant. And so literally the next day, on Monday, I had formed the first disaster relief charity, and many others following suit. And in the first week, I can't mention all of the names, but I can mention that in the first week, I started Charities for Union Square Hospitality Group, which owns a number of big restaurants in New York City and elsewhere. Thomas Keller Restaurant Group, and the Swagney Restaurant Group, started by Gavin Kaysen in Minnesota. And then we've had a number of others really across the country that have followed suit, and really wanting to help their people. In many cases, over 1,000 employees who have been furloughed. And this has really been a means to help them. And so we've been very proud of it.
That's fantastic, Sean. Let me ask you a question timeline-wise. I mean, this whole pandemic really started to hit in January, when it started to come across the Atlantic and whatnot, and it was going around the world, of course, and we were waiting and watching to see what happens. What was your timeline in starting to, when did you first get that phone call? What month would that have been? What time? And how long did it take to put all these programs in place? And are they finished now? And I obviously want to know what the end result will be or what it hopes to be, but give us a sense of timing on this.
Absolutely. So, in January, other than the president stopping flights to China, there really wasn't much talk about this in the United States or New York at that time. And so it was really March where I first got the phone call, I think, where reality set in across the country with this. And it was at that point where we got these things up and running. So there wasn't much talk about it in January or February. I remember talking about it with my wife and thinking, I guess this is no big deal. I thought I was going to be going skiing the week after I started these charities. It really was out of nowhere that this happened. So I got the call and we formed the charities right away. And so the question about the timeline of it is really one of how you form a charity. And it's almost a two-step process. You first have to form a nonprofit entity under state law. And here's an example of where the IRS is very generous, which is not something people think of with the IRS all the time. But actually, the day you form that nonprofit entity under state law, you form a nonprofit corporation, all contributions on that day become tax deductible going forward, provided that the organization, this new nonprofit corporation, timely submits its application to the IRS to become a 501c3, and that the IRS approves the application. So actually, it's really beginning on the day of formation, and we're able to get these entities formed within a day. They can start operating and receive tax-deductible contributions, which is so helpful in attracting donors and growing the fund that they can then distribute to their employees. And so we have a number of these up and running already.
Well, that's very interesting because part of this podcast, I would hope, and we both would hope, that this is going to inspire other leaders in this industry on a small level, on a medium level, on a big level. It doesn't matter, to get together to see what we can all do to help. So I'm very curious about the process. Now, it seemed like that happened very quickly, or at least the filing happened quickly, but the planning process and the goals of this, and that's going to be different for different organizations maybe, or maybe it's very similar, but I'm just curious what the initial goals were. And did those goals need to adapt or change when the chefs came to you and said, this is what we want to do? And you said, yeah, this will work, but that's got to change a little bit to shift to state laws. And obviously state laws are going to vary from state to state. Isn't that true?
Unquestionably. So the overarching goal of this was we want to help our people who are now without a job because no one's coming to the restaurant. They're not paid anymore. They're furloughed. We want to have a fund to help them. We've got to do it. There was such passion to create this. So that was the overarching goal. Now, my job as the exempt organization's lawyer is to structure this in a way that they're going to get approval as a 501c3.
Yes.
And so the IRS doesn't allow you to create a charity to give money to a specifically named individual. So I can't, if I know someone who's dying, even though that might be a charitable cause and maybe they're poor and they don't have money to pay for their medical care, I can't create a charity to benefit that specific person, because otherwise it would be like the IRS was giving me an income tax deduction for giving money to that person, and they don't view that as necessarily fair.
Yes.
So the two big things that we had to work through with all of the clients, and this is true with any charity that's going to help individuals, is we had to create a class of beneficiaries that was indeterminable, that couldn't result in specific individuals being identified. So it couldn't be the 30 employees in the front of the house of this restaurant. That's not a good charitable class. We had to make it all of the past and current and future employees of the restaurant group. And we made it also those impacted by the COVID-19 crisis and future crises. So that way, if the IRS was going to question us when we submitted the application about whether the class of beneficiaries was identifiable, we would say it's not, because this charity will exist in the future for future employees who have other emergency situations that are caused not only by COVID-19 but by other situations, both disasters or just personal emergencies.
So it's really broad-based. It's not just specifically focused on this pandemic. It could be any natural disaster or any unexpected act of God or anything that we just can't see around corners right now.
Yes, the way we've structured these, yes. And then the other big thing that the charities had to figure out is that they had to come up with objective criteria to distribute out the grants. It couldn't be, this haphazard approach where they decide we'll give this person a grant, we won't give this person a grant. They had to have objective criteria and a process in place by which their employees applied for a grant. There was a board that was appointed. And by the way, a majority of the board cannot be what we call substantial influencers of the restaurant group. So this creates this independence from the chefs. So the chefs were not even controlling this.
Interesting.
And actually, the board members were disproportionately rank and file employees of the restaurant. So, people in the front of the house, chefs, waiters, they were really the ones making the decisions. The majority of directors were not the owners or
wow.
in the restaurant. And so they had the control. We came up with grant-making policies that set up objective criteria. And then the board follows it and doles out the money that's been raised.
Where do the funds come from? Variety of sources?
So they do. I mean, one of the good things I think about restaurants is that there's a community of patrons of the restaurant who are looking to give. And I think that makes this type of a charity successful for restaurants. There obviously are other industries as well where a similar model could be followed. And we've talked to a number of the companies outside of restaurants who are talking about this as well. But yes, they come, I think, from inside. So there can be, key people, executives, owners who are giving money. Then there may be employees who even want to give money to the extent they're able. They're giving a little. In some cases, small amounts from paychecks are being given directly to these charities. And then patrons. They are getting big donations from sponsors of restaurants. Restaurants buy a lot of food, buy a lot of alcohol. So I'm encouraging them, go reach out to the people that you've been supporting for decades.
Absolutely.
And ask them to help out. And they're very receptive.
Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. So, I'm curious about hurdles, because there had to be hurdles. And a moment ago, you said that the board of directors couldn't be controlled or have any majority presence by these top industry chefs or any of the leaders that helped put this idea in place. But now you're going to the rank and file and you're going to people that work within the industry, and you needed to guide them through this process. And what comes to mind is, I'm a restaurant owner myself, and I've been in this business for 20 plus years or whatnot. And I've been applying for numerous government relief programs. And I want to get into that a little deeper, because there seems to be some overlap here in funds that might be available to an independent restaurant or to chain restaurants and all that sort of thing through Paycheck Protection Program and all that sort of thing. But those programs have shifted and changed, and they're still evolving, even though they've been signed, by the president and whatnot. And, some companies have received funds and some have yet to receive, and we're wondering what the timing is and all that. Was this a simple process, or did you go through a whole bunch of hurdles you had to navigate, because you specialize in this stuff, right? But was this a unique case? Was it different? Did it have any overlap with prior work you've done? I mean, take us there.
Yes and no. It was unique in that, I'm fortunate to have not lived as a lawyer, really through the other crises that have happened where we've had to set up disaster relief charities. Because, I graduated law school in 2007. So this was, after September 11th. New York, where I practiced, wasn't impacted so much by the hurricanes. They were more regionally focused, I think, those types of charities. So this was really the first time in my career that we had this huge crisis across the country. That we had to use these types of charities. Now, my law firm had done some of these on isolated instances before, but so that was unique. But the process by which a nonprofit becomes a 501c3 is the same, whether you're setting up this type of disaster relief charity or whether you're setting up, an amateur sports competition, after-school sports programs, arts organizations, science-based organizations. I mean, the types of charities I've set up are just really run the gamut based on anyone's specific interest in being philanthropic. So that process was somewhat similar, except that these charities are focused on grants to individuals, which does have different unique issues. But the process of becoming a 501c3, whether you're doing an after-school sports program or a restaurant relief fund, is the same.
That's the straightforward part, because a 501c is a 501c. They're just different entities doing different things. So some of these chefs, obviously, I mean, you mentioned Union Square Hospitality Group. Everyone has heard of Danny Meyer and Thomas Keller, of course, numerous restaurants, and Daniel Boulud and international restaurants all over the place. I mean, these people have far-ranging impacts and whatnot. But let's talk about what the end goals and what the results will be. Who will actually benefit within these restaurants? Because these are large organizations. Is it just for those specific organizations, or is it a broad-ranging, more of an industry charity where other restaurants can take part in this if they don't form their own charitable organization? How does that work?
So the individual charities that we've set up within the restaurant group are for employees, former employees of the restaurant group.
Of those groups, yeah.
Of those groups. Now, there are Mentor, for example, the charity that I'm on the board of, and Thomas Keller, Danielle Boulud, Jerome Bocuse, and then we have a culinary council of, I think it's about 50 of the top chefs in the country. We are forming a philanthropic fund, and then we're having an independent committee that's going to determine where the dollars we're raising are going to go. And those are going to go to support the culinary workforce that has helped the culinary community thrive in America. And by the way, it's critical that we support the culinary community, because if we don't, there's a risk that these restaurants may not reopen. So we got it. So Mentor's purpose really is to continue to make sure we can help out so that culinary excellence can continue to thrive in America. But there are probably any number of charities that may be looking to help individuals, but the ones we've formed are specific to that restaurant group. Now, you could, by the way, it would be possible to form a charity among a number of restaurant groups, among a specific region, if you had people who came together to do it, and it could support employees from a number of restaurant groups. The issue is going to be that you want to make sure that the funds you're raising are going to the people you care about.
Of course.
And it can't be a free-for-all, because if you have too many possible beneficiaries, you probably won't be able to get enough funds. Absolutely true.
So the next question I have, of course, is there overlap between different programs? Because let's start with unemployment, because the unemployment departments are absolutely getting crushed across the country, and they can't keep up, and they have to continually hire more people just to process the incoming calls. And some people who've been furloughed weeks and weeks ago are still waiting for their first benefits. And this is a huge problem, of course. And then there's Paycheck Protection Program. And between unemployment and paycheck protection, it's like, where are these employees going to make the most money? Because unemployment is also announcing the fact that on top of your regular benefits, certain people will qualify for an additional $600 a week, depending on, where you're at. Paycheck protection says that the business can obviously be forgiven these loans, provided 75% of the funds that they're approved for take care of payroll and to bring these people back and to rehire them and all of that. So are any of these groups that you're working with sort of applying for those relief programs as well? And will there be any overlap, or will you be excluded from one if you've already taken advantage of another? And if these employees are already collecting unemployment and now they're getting additional funds, do they have to pay anything back? It's like, begs that question.
That's a great question. So the charitable work that we're doing is not replacement for unemployment in any way. And in fact, it's very important that the money that the employees are getting from the charity is not meant to be severance pay. It's not meant to be an extra paycheck necessarily. It's actually meant to cover specific costs that the employee is struggling to cover. So examples would be, I've got a medical bill that I've got to pay. I'm going to get a grant to pay for this medical bill. My child, I have a tuition payment for my child's school. I'm going to get some help with that because I can no longer afford it. Or my rent. I can't pay my rent right now. And so we'll give a grant to help defer some of that cost. So it's actually, in the context of the charity, it's really for kind of life expenses that are coming up that the employee is struggling with. The charities are not created to maintain the employee's compensation in the way that unemployment. So actually, it's great that the employees are able to get unemployment if they're able to benefit from the stimulus packages, either through the loans that may be forgiven for the restaurants if they're eligible. Then that's great. This is an extra thing.
That's fantastic. I had no idea. This is really good news. So that would be a huge inspiration for everyone listening to this podcast if you're inspired by this to get together, because, there's lots of independent restaurants that have banded together to have buying groups, to get some of the economies of scale that we lose as independents versus the chains that have huge leverage in this business. So the same process or, idea can carry over to this to help our employees to pay all their incidentals that they can't necessarily meet today. I think that's an awesome idea. Let's talk about the tax benefits a little bit, Sean. And are some of these groups receiving some sort of a tax? Well, what are the benefits exactly? Because there's IRS exemptions here. And, unless you're a CPA or, a legal professional partner in a major law firm that understands this stuff, I have no idea. Can you explain some of that?
Right. So let's talk about the benefits both for the charity. Let's talk about three people who are going to get benefits, and I'll talk about the tax benefits of each.
Okay,
tax
thanks.
benefits to the charity that's being created, the tax benefits to people that are giving to the charity, and then the tax benefits to the people who are receiving money from the charity. Okay, let's talk about all three, and let's talk about the charity first. So a charity collects money. And it's going to use that money to make grants to individuals. The benefit that the charity gets is that it doesn't have to pay any income tax on the money that it receives. That it's exempt from income tax. That's why it's a 501c3. So all the dollars, and we hope it's going to be a lot of dollars that the charity receives, they don't have to pay any income tax on that money. So that's the benefit the charity gets. Now, the benefit that people that give to the charity, they get an income tax deduction, right? So if I give to any charity, I get an income tax deduction for giving to that charity.
Of course.
Actually, in the stimulus package, they increased the amount that's deductible this year for cash contributions to charity to up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. It was previously 60%, and prior to that, it was 50%. So if you actually have a lot of money to give, you can get potentially a larger deduction this year. So that can be very valuable.
Absolutely.
Because you're getting to deduct this money off your taxes. It's a big savings. And if you think about it, it's really almost the government is sharing in the cost of giving to charity, because they're saying we're going to give you a discount on your taxes by giving. So any individual who gives is eligible to receive this tax deduction. Okay. Now, of course, the benefit to the people that receive the money, they do not have to pay income tax on the money they receive from the charity. It's like a gift, or it's also could be viewed as a qualified disaster payment. And so in both cases, the amount that the individual receives is free of tax. So tax benefits going all around here.
That's fantastic. That's a win-win-win.
For sure.
So we talked about this, these rules varying state by state. Now, your firm and you yourself personally are specializing in this right now, and this will not be the last restaurant group that you represent. And at the end, I want to obviously ask you how we can contact you if other, industry professionals want to get more information, or at least, or even try to set this up through you. But does your firm have, license to practice in multiple states? Are you national? I mean, you have different offices in different states as well.
Yes.
I mean, are you limited anywhere?
So we have offices across the country, and we've set these up across the country. So no, we obviously don't, practice law in every single state, but we're able to set these up because this is a tax issue. And
Yes.
so we're filing a tax exemption application and just setting up corporations. So yes, we've set these up everywhere.
Fantastic. If there's anything else you want to talk about that I've missed in relation to this specific, charitable situation, let's please do that. Otherwise, I'd really like to shift now to your work with Mentor, and I'd like to learn more about what Mentor does, the different programs they're involved in, and then your work, of course, on the prestigious culinary competition. That's very fascinating as well.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
let us know. Did I miss anything?
No, I think we really covered it. Obviously there's nuances. There are state filings that have to be made for a nonprofit, depending on where you operate. But I think it's easier to set these up than people think. And like you had mentioned, people can do it for their individual restaurant group. If it's more effective, maybe you bring a few groups together, a few small restaurants, together, and you'll be able to set it up. It's not as hard as people think.
Let me ask one last question
Sure.
regarding timeline of funding. Do you have any idea in sight when people will start to receive these funds? Have they started receiving money?
They have. Yes, they have started. In many cases, they have started. Like I said, once the money comes in, you get the income tax deduction right away, and the charities are operating. We're getting approval for these. We expect on an expedited basis. Because the president has declared this to be a disaster, we are eligible for approval on an expedited basis, and so we've asked for that.
Is there a marketing campaign for this? I mean, again, these high-profile industry leaders have done this for their own organizations, but this has such far-ranging implications across the country, to help other groups similar. I mean, besides social media, what types of things are they doing to sort of spread the word that, hey, you too can make a difference here?
In terms of soliciting contributions for their own charities, or informing other people about the ability to set this type of charity up?
Yeah, more so that, because that's the bigger idea here. I mean, they're making a huge impact on their own, but like I said, this has such a bigger impact that can be made if other people are inspired to, my restaurant's closed right now. I've got some idle time. I'd like to help others. I'd like to give back. This is a great, inspiring idea. Let's talk about doing this. That sort of thing. It's like the word is going to get around just by who they are.
Absolutely. The word is spreading, and I've had many calls from people who've heard of me from this restaurant, the other restaurant group, which has been fabulous, because one of the benefits of me being able to do it again and again and again is that it's easier, it's cheaper, it's quicker, because the process is in place. The documents are in many cases similar. Everyone has their own individual nuances. So we have this ability, and we have a fantastic team at the firm who's really working so hard on handling every aspect of it, from the state filings to the federal filings, the solicitation filings. So the word has gotten out, and then also, a lot of accountants and other lawyers who may work with the restaurant group on other issues that are arising. I mean, restaurants right now are having difficulty with insurance recovery is a very big issue in restaurants right now. So my firm is helping people with that too.
Oh, yes.
And, we're sharing in, we're helping. If I have a client, I try to connect them in that way, and the other way around. And then rent abatement is another issue that's coming up a lot in restaurants too. And so as a big firm, we see a lot of restaurant clients in different spheres. And then we're able to make sure we're giving them full service and just informing them of the different opportunities where they may be able to help money. And all of it trickles down.
Can you also speak Sean, to this to the lawsuits that we're hearing about, against the insurance companies that have exclusions in place, yet these restaurants are claiming that, their places have been infected, and that's the reason why they've had to close down or alter their operations. And, I've only read some of the headlines recently about that, but you may be better informed.
Well, I would say I'm a little bit informed. I'm not an insurance recovery expert, but I can say that Blank Rome has one of the leading insurance recovery practices in the country. And so I've heard through speaking with my partners in that department about the theories they're coming up with, forming classes to do this. I obviously have spoken with a number of restaurant groups who are at the forefront of doing this and, making these claims. So I don't want to speak exactly to the arguments because I'd rather focus on articulating the stuff that I know best. But certainly if there are restaurants who are interested in learning more, I'm happy to speak with them and put them in the right hands. And I know that our firm is being very generous in reviewing policies as a courtesy to restaurant clients without taking a dollar from people. And so, then from there, we advise on whether there's, possibility of a claim. But yes, anyone who's interested, I'd be happy to talk more about that with.
Well, that's
connect them to the right person who's truly an expert at Blank Rome.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much. It's obvious that your firm has broad-ranging specializations that can help many different industries, not just hospitalities and restaurants, but that is a major issue right now. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Mentor. Tell me everything that Mentor does, how long you've been involved, and some of the benefits of that organization to the industry, and then obviously we'll focus on the competition after that.
Sure. So I'll tell you a little story that really this is probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I think I was 30 at the time. And, there was an accountant I knew who said, I'd like you to help out with this restaurant client. And, I went to Per Se it must have been a Tuesday morning, and I was, in a small private dining room there with Thomas Keller and Danielle Boulud, and I gave my thoughts on the Internal Revenue Code. And it was really, almost a slightly intimidating thing. I was a young guy. I mean, I knew who these people were. Yes. And here I am, giving them advice on the Internal Revenue Code. But I guess they liked what I had to say. And there was a lawyer who was on the board at the time, a guy named Joel Buckman, who passed away, but was really a mentor to me, a fabulous person. And he had, he and I developed a friendship. He actually dated my aunt, out of all, surprising benefits that came out of, wonderful things that came out of Mentor. But, through Joel and developing relationships with Thomas and Danielle, my firm and I, started getting more involved in the work. And then Joel stepped down from the board and I took over, and that was 2015. And so at that point, I really became much more integral to Mentor. And at that point, pre-corona, we had 2 big focuses. The first focus was training the United States team in the Bocuse d'Or culinary competition. So for people that don't know, the Bocuse d'Or is the Culinary Olympics. It happens every other year. So it's every other January, odd number Januaries, in Lyon, France. Lyon is like a culinary capital of the world.
It is for sure.
And this competition has been going on for over 30 years. And countries all across the world gather together, and each country gets about 5 hours to prepare a meat and a vegetarian plate. And then they're judges. It's like a super high level top chef, but it's very culinary focused. The plating and the quality of the food is super elegant and sophisticated. And so this happens every other January. And so Mentor, really it's a 2-year cycle. We select the United States team in November of the 2 years before. Then the entire next year, we train the team. And then about 14 months later, they compete. And actually, really thanks to Mentor, which has been in existence for just over 10 years, the United States in 2017 won gold for the first time in the entire history of the competition. And it was really just, a phenomenal testament to the dedication and the training of these people. I mean, these people leave, these young chefs, they leave their job for a year basically, and they train night and day in the Mentor training kitchen in California. And we have coaches that are employed full-time to help train them. We design platters that they plate the food on. It's really an amazing thing. And, the goal is always to try to go for golds. And, we were successful for the first time in 2017. And I'm sure we'll be successful many times again. So that's one focus, is training the U.S. team. The second focus is the stage program, which is, we have a grant program. This is nothing to do with coronavirus, but this is a grant program where we give what we call stages, apprenticeships, internships to young chefs so that they can get a very specialized experience in the culinary arts. And then they bring that experience back to enhance the culinary arts in America. And so it could be that someone applies for a stage and they want to learn about, raw vegetables and how you do culinary. I'm not a chef, so I'm going to butcher the words. But I know maybe it's not cooking if it's raw, but you cook with raw vegetables.
Of course.
It could be anything. It could be, very fine French techniques, and they go all over the world. And they get these very specialized experiences, and then they bring them back to the restaurants they work in or elsewhere. And they enhance the culinary arts in America. So we have a program, and many people apply every year. And we have just like we have we were talking about with the grants on the Corona, a objective criteria that we use to decide who gets a grant, and we give them out, and they report back to us, and the stories are unbelievable.
That is fascinating. What an exacting process. I'm getting a sense that it must be incredibly hard because there's so many talented young chefs out there. Are they young chefs that are just starting their careers? Are they veterans, or is it a combination of both?
It's actually all young chefs. And in terms of the Bocuse d'Or, I don't know the specific ages, but they're very young chefs. I think I'm 38 and I'm too old, I believe. I don't quote me on that, but I believe there are age criteria, and it's actually for a head chef and a commis. So, and the commis is younger than the head chef, but they come from leading restaurant groups across the country. In the tryouts, we've had, really people from everywhere, Hawaii, New York, and everywhere in between.
Well, this sounds like, I'm sure you're familiar with the National Restaurant Association's Prostart program, and I'm seeing similarities, although this is on a much grander, more prestigious level, of course, but the same idea applies. It's really to inspire young culinarians that have a passion for this business, and, they give you a Bunsen burner or just a little cook stove, and they throw some ingredients at you, and these kids train, really diligently towards this goal. And what can you do to come up with a very creative dish to impress the judges in a limited amount of time, not knowing what those ingredients are and what you're going to do with it before the competition begins? And each state, has a restaurant association, and many of them also participate in the Prostart program. So this seems like just a much greater extension to that simple idea, but it's awesome that you're involved in that organization.
It's really a pleasure. It's an honor, and to be able to do work, as a lawyer. I didn't even really want to be a lawyer, to be honest. So, I sort of ended up becoming a lawyer, and I love it. But, I think I love it because I'm helping people. And, I'm not sitting there suing one company against the other. Everything I do helps people. And so that I can use my legal skills, my tax skills, and helping people, it's a great honor and a pleasure.
I don't know how you have any free time between being a partner in a major law firm. You're also an adjunct professor at New York University of Law, right? So you're teaching students. That's incredible. You're involved on the board of directors of Mentor. I mean, do you have any free time?
Well, not as much as I'd like. That's an issue I try to work out. But, I make free time. I think, as you get busier, you focus on, and everyone has to take free time because it's the only way you'll be good at what you do. You can't work 24/7, 365 without taking a break because you'll just go into overdrive and you'll fail. So I do take free time, but I think as you get more mature and you're busier, you've got to focus on the people and the activities that are most important to you, that really help you relax, that are meaningful to you, and ultimately make you better at what you do. And then, I think the other thing is that if you love what you do, and I really do, sometimes work becomes pleasure, and there's fluidity between, your clients and your friends.
You mentioned skiing at the beginning of the episode. I'm a huge skier, going on 45 years, actually more than that. But nonetheless, I had quite a bit of skiing in this year until the season got cut short nationally, which is kind of a bummer because there's still great snow out there on the hill. And I went so far as it's an annual tradition. My daughter and I will literally hike or climb up some of the steepest terrain at our ski resort, and we'll ski down after the lift shut down. We did that a couple of weeks ago, and now there's no trespassing signs anywhere because it became a huge thing. Everybody's skinning or snowshoeing or climbing up and skiing down. And okay, social distancing is now impacting every part of our life. Where were you skiing? Did you get much skiing in this year?
Well, I didn't get as much in as I would like. I did go, my wife and I were in Beaver Creek over Christmas, and then I was in Sundance in Park City over, the end of January. So those were the two big trips. Now, nice. I was supposed to have been back in Beaver Creek, actually with our niece, who is, 2.5. So that would have been her first time on ski. So that was truly a bummer.
Yes.
And, I had actually a couple of other little weekend trips booked. I have an Epic Pass, so I try to use it as much as I possibly can. Living in New York City, it's a little bit more challenging just to go skiing for the weekend because you either have to take a long drive or you have to fly, and I don't mind doing either. But so I did get some skiing in, not as much as I'd like. And, you never know. I think they say actually some Breckenridge and Heavenly may reopen. So I'm not holding my breath, but let's hope. If they do, I'll see you out there.
Well, we're kind of kindred spirits. It's been a passion of mine for decades, and I will continue to ski until I can't walk anymore. Well, Sean, it has been my absolute pleasure hosting you on the podcast. And our goal, of course, for this episode will literally be to inspire this industry. Whatever you can do, big, small, whatnot, do your part. Let's help rise the tide so that we can all come out the other side and emerge stronger, more profitable businesses, and to help those that work for us that do so much to make our restaurants successful. That was the Restaurant RockStars Podcast, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, Sean, for being a guest.
Bye-bye. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for tuning in, guys. We can all do something, do a little or a lot to help this industry move forward. There's so many inspiring examples of this business rallying together, this hospitality industry, whether it's a company offering special deals and concessions that'll help with a product that'll help operators through COVID-19, or a large-scale collaborative with these leading chefs of the world, really, that have gotten together to help the industry. Everybody can do their part. We're resilient, we're creative, we're resourceful. Think about what you can do to help the industry forward. So, if that was an intriguing episode, I hope that you subscribe on iTunes if you haven't already, or opt in. Go to our website, restaurantrockstars.com, give us your email address, and this podcast will come to you every single week. So we certainly appreciate your tuning in. I also want you to know that we have founded a new Facebook group for restaurant operators and hospitality industry professionals. It's called Restaurant RockStars Official. So it's a new place. Hopefully it's a forum for you to share your questions, your ideas, your challenges, your pain points, anything we can do to help this industry forward. So I encourage you to go to Restaurant RockStars Official and join the group. Thanks again for listening, and please let others in the industry know all about the Restaurant RockStars podcast if you're enjoying what you're hearing, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Restaurant RockStars Podcast. For lots of great resources, head over to restaurantrockstars.com. See you next time.